Over to you, Gabrielle.
Hi, thank you, Annika, and to the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform's Community of Practice on Environment, Climate, Conflict, and Peace for organizing this important series on peace at COP28. I think when you think about COP and the UNFCCC, I think a lot of people wouldn't immediately jump to peace building and security policies, but these issues are very much intertwined. And in fact, this is the first year that peace will feature as a thematic day at COP, so it is a very timely topic. Today, this session is on youth as catalyst for peace and climate action, and it's also quite special for us as well. So who is us? My name is Gabrielle Peterson, and I am the creator and contact point for the working group on climate, peace, and security at YOUNGO. And this is the official youth constituency for the UNFCCC. And this is also the first year that our global constituency is collectively advocating on these issues. And we look forward to raising awareness of some of these interlinkages between youth, peace, and climate security, as well as highlighting the role of youth in implementing solutions to many of the security challenges connected to climate change. And this brings me to opening to the floor to our youth experts here today. And I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their work. In the meantime, in the chat, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself to the rest of the attendees here today so you can get to know each other. It's going to be an interactive session. Don't worry, we'll use Mentimeter, so all of you anonymous. But for now, introduce yourself in the chat. So anyways, I'd like to introduce our expert speakers here. Haruna, would you like to begin?
All right, thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you everyone for being on. My name is Salim. Yeah, I prefer to be called Salim, really. Haruna Salim Busa, and I come from Uganda. I am currently in Germany doing a volunteer program and an organization called Act for Transformation. And here my focus is peace work and the component of global learning, but also I'm affiliated with an international education program called Peace Jam. And I have done a lot of work with Peace Jam and currently part of the Peace Jam Europe youth leadership team. So that's briefly who I am.
Thank you, Salim. I appreciate it. And next, I'd like to hear from Robin. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us more about your work?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. And thanks for the invitation. Very happy to be here today. So I'm Robin. I'm currently volunteering with Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security, and also founded New World Research, a think tank in Monaco, more focused on climate peace building and climate security. And essentially, currently, I'm part of the Global Coalition on Youth Peace Security, which is that amazing organization, umbrella organization, where we're sharing all the best practices on youth peace security, and particularly engaged on the climate peace building program. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to diving into all the youth peace security expertise that we have here today too. And Sakshi, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gabrielle. Very nice to see you all. And I'm Sakshi, as you encountered me rightly. I'm from India, and I'm an author, geopolitical researcher, graphic designer, public speaker, and motorcyclist, you can say. So I have written 2 of my anthologies and currently serving as a global youth ambassador at their world. I also serves as a policy officer at YOUNGO Human Rights Working Group. I'm the research associate at National Maritime Foundation, which is one of the part of Indian Navy as a research organization. So here I am, looking forward for more interactions with you all. Thank you.
Thank you all, and I'm really excited to dive into your thoughts and experiences, particularly on this youth lens on this issue, which is, I think, sometimes an overlooked one. So thank you. But first, as this is designed to be a capacity building session, I would like to turn to the audience and get a sense of your familiarity with issues surrounding climate security and their impact on youth. To do this, we are going to use a Mentimeter poll, and I just want to pull this up for you. And let's see. I hope you can see us there. We're going to go to menti.com, and you will see that there is a code there. If you can go to menti.com or use that QR code, you can enter the code here, 84813230, to join our session, and I'll just give you all a minute to do so. I hope you've all had a chance to join. It's menti.com and code 84813230. And this will allow you to participate in our session today. And I want you to know I see a bunch of likes, so thank you for joining. That's great. And don't worry, your answers are anonymous, so please just give them your best guess. But first, I think when we talk about climate security, I think it's very useful to consider the scale of impact of climate-related risks on the global population. So I'd like to pose my first question to the audience, which is, what percentage of countries worldwide do you think are facing catastrophic ecological threat? And what is the highest level of ecological threat? And if you can select your answer. Oh, interesting. That was pretty fast. We'll just give it a minute. It's so fun to watch everybody put it in their guess. Great. So I think that's probably most of you. So according to the Institute of Economics and Peace Ecological Threat Report, the answer is actually 56% of countries are facing catastrophic ecological threats, while another 17% face high levels of ecological threat. So that's a total of 73% of countries globally are facing higher catastrophic levels of threat. So the region with the highest average of ecological threat is actually Sub-Saharan Africa, followed by South Asia and South America. So these are the regions most at risk. And these threats were driven primarily by issues of water stress and food security, in addition to increasing population rates and exacerbation of resource scarcity due to natural disasters. So in the conversations around COP and climate change, we often hear this term mitigation, which focuses on solutions around reducing climate change, right? This is the preventative measure. And this is just one picture of where climate security is falling within that conversation. And when we mitigate climate change, we are also working to prevent these threats. So I'm going to go to the next question here. What happens to countries that are already dealing with these threats? You know, we often also hear about the term adaptation, or how we respond to climate change and deal with the consequences. So this is another area of focus for advocacy for us at YOUNGO, and where many peace building initiatives come into the picture. So what happens when societies aren't equipped with the necessary structures to be resilient and to adapt to climate-driven threats? So the IEP also works to monitor the level of resilience in countries through their positive peace building and positive peace index, which brings me to this question. Of the 30 least resilient countries, what percentage do you think face at least one catastrophic ecological threat? I'll just wait a minute for you to vote. A few more. All right, I think that might be it for now. So the correct answer here is 90%. That means that 27 of the world's least resilient countries that struggle with these structures face at least one catastrophic climate risk. And these 27 countries are home to 768 million people who are at extreme risk. Again, this is where we have to not only prevent these threats through climate initiatives, but also work on peace building structures to enable positive peace within these societies, to make them more resilient, to be able to deal with the effects of these threats when they do occur. I'd like to broaden that back out, though, and consider what this might mean now for future generations. So as we've seen, there's currently a significant overlap between countries with the lower scores on the peace index, which means increased vulnerabilities, and those countries facing catastrophic ecological threat. And the same study that came up with these numbers also estimated that the 40 least peaceful countries globally are expected to add an additional 1.3 billion people by 2050. So that's 1.3 billion people who are going to be facing these issues as we move forward if we don't solve this issue, if we don't take action now. And it's important to look forward and ask, our next question, which is, how many people do we think are going to be living in countries facing catastrophic ecological threats by 2050? And I'll wait a minute for your vote. And I think that's most of the votes. So I can say that the IEP also estimates that by 2050, 3.4 billion people would live in countries. So that is correct. The majority of you did get that correct, based on the current trajectories. And this is compared to an estimated 2 billion people today. So this is not a small number of people. This is a significant population of the world who's struggling with these issues and who will be facing the consequences of these threats. And so this 2050 population really represents the future of the youth of today. And more than half the world's current population is under the age of 30. And, in some other certain regions of the world, that number can be as high as 75%. So this is where we need to look at the impact of climate change and how it disproportionately affects these youth populations. So I do want to open this other question to the audience as well as we talk about the impact of ecological threats. And this is an open-ended answer. Please add a phrase or two into the box, and you can add more than one. But what do you think are some of the biggest issue areas between climate, environment, and peace and security? What are some of the biggest challenges facing the world today in this space? What do you think? Feel free to just add a phrase or two and they'll start populating on the screen. Political deadlock, armed conflicts. Anyone else? Oh, here we go. Food security, transboundary conflict, food shortages, threat to critical infrastructure, climate refugees, threats to education, droughts. So all quite a span of things. Clean water, population growth, war. Yeah, so quite a range of potential challenges and issues. And so we see some more adding now. Weak governance, human security, transboundary conflict, justice issues. Yeah, all of the above, right? So there's a lot of different types of challenges that we have to come together, right? We have to come together to deal with these issues. And while youth are disproportionately impacted, I think it's very important to note that, youth are contributing to the solutions, but we need these kinds of intergenerational dialogues. We need these kinds of capacity building sessions to bring people together to talk about how to address these problems that are bigger than all of us. So I would say on one screen, please do leave the Mentimeter up. We will come back to it. But at this point, I would like to turn the floor over to our speakers to respond to some of these things that we've seen in the Mentimeter. And also just to pose them the same question, what do you wish people understood about the connections between youth, peace, and security and the climate environmental security? So maybe let's start with Salim.
All right, thank you, Gabrielle. And yeah, it already seems to me like, wow, the people on here are very much informed about the whole climate, peace, and security nexus, and it's very interesting. I want to start by saying that for sure, there is a very big interconnectedness between peace and security and climate and environment, because I think what affects the other comes back to the other. I don't know if I'm making sense. I do so much work around positive peace, so I have learned to draw a line between the interconnectedness of these issues. I think for sure that peace for me, is not mere absence of war, like we all may want to appreciate. So when we have issues of insecurity, issues of climate injustice, it comes back to peace and disrupting the peace, and the other way around as well. So there is a lot of interconnectedness, and these issues really come up in so many phases, in so many aspects. When we have conflict over resources, for example, it disrupts the peace, it disrupts the security, and that's just a resource. When we have scarcity of a resource and people are not able to acquire the resource, maybe people are starving because of food security, that is an impact or an aspect of climate change. But when people go hungry, then they don't have the peace. So I think that is the kind of connectedness that lies between environment and climate, but also peace and security. Yeah, because these issues mingle quite so much. I mean, we have issues like climate mobility or climate refugees, like someone already mentioned. Yeah, when people face challenges, I have personally witnessed this back home, where many people have been displaced because of climate-related challenges and impacts. Yeah, but when they get displaced, it comes with a lot of security threats. It comes with a lot of threatening of the peace in the community. So yeah, the interconnectedness is really strong.
Thank you, Haruna. I really appreciate that. And I couldn't agree more on the interconnectedness point. I just want to pull out something you said about, peace and not just the absence of war, right? There are positive structures in place that make a functioning, resilient society, and focusing on how we can build those structures, I think, is absolutely crucial to help make ourselves not only to mitigate some of these effects, but adapt to them as well. So thank you very much. Sakshi, I wanted to open the floor to you to respond to the same question. What do you wish people understood about some of these linkages?
Well, thank you. So before I go into the exact content of what this topic or the question is all about, I want to take a moment to remember all the young peace builders on the front lines as we speak, and as what is going on in the current situation. There are young people in Somalia, in Iraq, in Colombia, in Libya, who are in various ways promoting the peace in their communities, meditating the conflicts among the tribal groups, armed groups, and really advocating even peacekeeping in most of the advanced, complex, and humanitarian setting. Okay, and when we come to the conflict, it's also considered into the conflict setting around the world. So I first take this moment to remember the sacrifices and the bravery and the courage of young peace builders around the world. And I also want to say hello to all of them, the participants and the audience over here. Recently, I have come up with the question that I have asked so many people, what is this peace mean to you? So several people answered me several different answers from different people. So the answer that I usually get, it's definitely rarely the absence of conflict. For example, when I asked the question that what does this peace mean to you? So they answered me, peace for me is to doing the job that I love. Peace for me is to marrying the person I love. Peace for me is to having the freedom of expression and to express my thoughts in freedom. So this is what I come to know, that peace for us looks like very different things. And when we put that in the context of the climate change and climate action, if we are not going to have a planet, a decent planet, a healthy planet, a livable planet, or in the next 20 to 30 years, how are we going to talk about the peace? When somebody asks you, what do you want to be in the future? How can we even think about 15 years or 10 years or 20 years down the line, when we don't know if we are going to have a planet to live in or not? So with that note, we need to put all this in the context and really see peace as a broader concept, and a concept that allows all of us to live a livable, peaceful, and better life, and have our well-being as human beings assured. This is what I personally feel, and this is what for me.
Thank you so much. And I think that's really important also to point out that, maybe one person's picture of what they want most to feel peaceful, to feel secure, might be something different, but at the same time, it's so human. It's so universal, you know? So while we may have different images of peace building and peace
Yes,
builders,
definitely.
like the idea of well, the world we want to live in is truly
Yes.
safe, secure, and free. So I appreciate that perspective. Robin, would you like to answer the same question?
Yes, sure. Well, actually, thank you very much for the intro. That was quite impactful, I think, and I really like what was said also. So I think I will entirely second what was just said, maybe using a little bit of a different approach. Because as we mentioned before, there's a lot of interconnection, and it can have a lot of impact on just livelihoods and on the availability, let's say, of opportunities. And that impacts young people, I guess, particularly, especially coming from the side of youth peace security. So with our working group, we actually did a mapping of actions related to youth peace security and climate change. And one of the things that came out a lot from that is actually the big impact of climate change on availability of opportunity, whether it is related to education or professional opportunities, and essentially that's often leading to violence. As we mentioned, was already said very clearly before, but yeah, we do have also to take into account that peace is not only just absence of conflict, but there can be situations of social violence also that have a big impact uh, on livelihoods. If we take, for example, recently, especially around the Mediterranean basin, we had a lot of fires, we had a lot of floodings. And one of the answers that I gave on the Mentimeter is actually damage to critical infrastructure. What we think of that is with the floodings, for example, we had a lot of schools that were destroyed, and so many schools destroyed means so many young people with no access to education. When we look at all the fires, that's a lot of jobs that were stripped apart from especially young people living in working on the tourism industry. Right? It's often it's an easy sector to go into for summer jobs or to make money easily, and it's a way for people to have let's say access to livelihoods. So many opportunities that got stripped away, and so many people that will need to find another way, either leave their home to find a job somewhere else, or when it's not possible to leave the home because you have a family that is dependent on you, or you have so many reasons that you cannot leave your home, will essentially live in situation of social violence. So I think that's also one of the key highlights to when we talk about the interlinkage with youth peace security and climate change. Is that impact it can have, let's say, on the also on the long term on the whole generation.
And I think that's a really good point, that we're not just looking at the immediate crisis, that this is like a whole economic cycle that happens when you have this. It's not just let's solve this problem today and move on. This is people losing opportunity, losing their jobs, losing their future, and this is particularly impactful on youth. We have a lot longer to go, looking forward as we say, how can we move forward, and what happens when youth are displaced and things like that. Like, that's quite impactful at a young age, also psychologically. So I think that's very important to highlight. And at this point, I would actually like to bring the audience back to the Mentimeter for a minute to maybe just reflect on some of these specific impacts, some that have been pulled out here with regard to how things impact youth in particular. And here we go. I will move to the next one. So just a reminder that if you X'd out of it, it's menti.com and our code is 84813230. And I see some people giving me a little thumbs up to say that they're in. So again, just giving that one more minute. So, I was also listening to some of the things that I was reflecting on myself. for my own answer to this question. And I think, like many of you, it does come down to some of the impacts on youth populations, which is where I think it's easy to overlook the scale and the long-lasting effects. So UNICEF had produced some very interesting data on the impacts specifically on children. So not even all youth, just children specifically. So this doesn't even include the entire youth population, but I did just want to highlight some of this impact that is happening, particularly in the formative years of people's lives. But it's estimated that 99 point something percent that of every single child in the world is exposed to at least one major climate and environmental hazard. Every single one. And that also leads to 80 million children dealing with at least 6 major identifiable threats. And those numbers are just astronomical when you think about the world population. So I know that water scarcity was mentioned as a major concern, so I do want to focus on that for a second. And, you know, with increasing global temperatures and a third of the world's children dealing with issues like heat waves and increasing desertification and many other issues, water scarcity is a growing concern. So I just would like to do a quick poll about how many children do you think, or are you aware of, that are highly exposed to water scarcity worldwide? And I'll leave this for the Mentimeter poll. Waiting for some of the answers to come in. Again, it's menti.com. It's code 84813230. Okay, that's the responses before. I think some of you left the poll. Okay, there we go. A few more coming in. All right, so the majority of you seem to think it's 768 million. Is actually 920 million children. And again, that's just children. That is not even all that would be considered under youth, right, in terms of age. So that's more than a third of the world's children. And to put that in perspective, IEP estimates more than 1.4 billion people live in regions experiencing severe levels of water stress. And in these countries, at least 20% of the population do not have access to clean drinking water. So just to keep that in mind is one of the major issues and its impact on children. Food security was also mentioned as another concern. Since 1981, the number of natural disasters has tripled. So extreme temperatures leading to drought or flooding or natural disasters that disrupt agricultural societies and global trade routes make food insecurity a reality. It raises food prices and it makes them inaccessible. So worldwide, how many people do you think are estimated to suffer from chronic hunger? Just waiting for the responses. I think the majority have said 783 million people. And that is correct. According to the World Food Program, it is 783 estimated million people. And 1 in 10 of the world's population suffer from chronic hunger. And based on just the 79 countries where the World Food Program operates, they estimate that more than 345 million people are facing high levels of food insecurity. And furthermore, they estimate that 45 million children under the age of 5 are estimated to suffer from acute malnutrition. And that's just children under the age of 5. So, you know, lack of food and water, in addition to other security issues and instabilities that are happening in these countries, which again, are, as we've learned, can be further exacerbated by these climate-driven issues. This can lead to issues of forced displacement. I know that's something that our speakers also brought up. And this issue also disproportionately affects youth population. So I do want to ask you another question on the Mentimeter. According to UNICEF, as of 2022, how many children have been displaced from their homes worldwide? What do you think? Sorry, it's the most depressing quiz you've ever taken. All right, so we have some responses. It seems like the majority think it's 45.6 million. It is actually 43.3 million is the correct answer. So as of 2017, UNICEF estimated that 1 in 3 children living outside their country of birth was a refugee. And that was before 2022's record-breaking high of the 43.3 million displaced children. And it was estimated that 60% were displaced due to violence and other issues related to that. So in addition, the UN Refugee Agency estimates that since 2009, 1 person every second is displaced specifically by disaster. And with an average of 22.5 million people directly displaced due to climate or weather-related events from 2008 to 2018. So I do just want to like highlight that these issues aren't maybe, I think it's something that sometimes we think about, but you don't realize the scale of them or the impact that they're having on, in this case, children. And the fact that this is their formative years and they're the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable populations, right? So we need to consider these things as we talk about how we can move forward and look at how we can enable youth to step up in these spaces. So as you can see, not only are climate and environmental issues inexorably interconnected with peace and security issues, but these issues will continue to affect children and youth at disproportionate rates. But, it's important, again, just to be hopeful and turn around, youth are not complacent, they're not helpless. And an innumerable youth-led climate and peace initiatives exist worldwide. As Robin has pointed out, like their organization is trying to map these things. YOUNGO is working on a youth stocktake about youth's contributions to climate. So we're working to try and demonstrate the impact that youth are making despite what's happening to youth populations as a result of climate change. So before we return to our speakers, I do want to ask the audience one more question, which is, now that we've identified some of the security challenges facing the world, and particularly youth related to climate, with regard to climate security, what do you think might be some of the major challenges facing these youth-led solutions? Funding, yes, I think we can all agree on that, and I'm sure several of our speakers will emphasize that, but that is absolutely correct. Any other ideas? Yes, money. Any other thoughts? Lack of trust. Seat at the table, right? Access. Not being heard. Let's give it one more minute. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think funding is definitely a major concern, and access, and this idea of maybe dismissing younger populations. But again, as we said, more than half the world's population is under 30. So dismissing it seems a bit, short-sighted in many ways. But I will now not get on my soapbox about that. I will turn it back over to our speakers. And again, keep the Mentimeter. We'll come back to it one more time. But at this point, I want to turn it back to our speakers and just ask you, what do you envision as the role of youth in climate security and climate diplomacy? And what challenges and roadblocks do you feel are most common or have you personally encountered? Maybe let's start this time with Robin.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. It is a bit of an interesting phrase that but I think it's very important to remind the scale of the crisis. Thank you very much for that. In terms of the issues and the challenges, what came out instantly was funding. Right? For the same thing in our mapping. We also asked that question, but for the main challenge, especially what was pointed out here, is also that funding is a big source of stress for some of that youth. So you have the will and wishes but just do not have the resources to apply it. Now, in terms of, I think what can be done, well, there's some different opportunities on how youth can get involved. Mainly, I would say that young people can play major structures, right, in traditional security fields also, like asserting their role or the importance or the scale, like you just did, of climate security. It's getting done a lot more. It's an emerging field that is getting a lot of traction. But I think it's very important to challenge the established structures, especially traditional security fields. We talked about big big organizations working on defense or you go to very sorry, that's I'll try to listen sense then. I think it's very important also to do a bit of education on the team structure. Not too long ago, it's a personal anecdote, but not too long ago, I actually was talking about climate security to some colleagues. And actually, one of the answers I got was, "Do you really believe in that bullshit?" And it was quite surprising because it was a very established structure. It was something that one actually used to words climate security. So
Robin,
it's a
can you
difficult
speak up a
communication
little?
to remind that it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were just cutting
I
out
can
of
try to do I can try
better. Yeah,
to talk a bit
thank
more
you.
in the mic if that's better. All
That's
right.
better.
Yeah, I think then I can just be very brief in the answer to summarize what I just said. So I think there's a role to play as disruptors in the traditional security fields. So mind the importance and the scale of like
Robin, I think you've cut out for us for a minute, so I'm just going to put a pin in it. But I think it's really important what you were saying, like this idea that. Yeah, sorry, Robin, it's cut. It's cut. I don't know. It's coming through. Sorry, but I think it's really important. You were saying like this idea that when you raise these issues, a lot of time you're met with this hostility, like as you said, them questioning if it's valid at all. Like, do you really believe any of that? And when you look at sort of the scale, and I'm seeing in the chat too that some of our experts in the audience are also adding like even more information on that, and it's just so important. So I think that's really key. And to realize that this is a reality for many and is a reality for all in the end, whether you want it to be or not. So it's just important to highlight what you've run into in terms of a roadblock there. Sakshi, would you like to go next and some of the challenges that you face, but also how you envision youth as partners in this space?
Definitely. Firstly, let us acknowledge that, let me know if I am not audible. So let us acknowledge that today's youth are not merely the leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders of today. In the realm of peace and security, climate action, they bring fresh perspectives and innovative solutions to the age-old conflicts. When I am doing as a youth organization, or I'm into the organization, I come to know that young people, through their interconnectedness and digital acumen, have a unique ability to foster the dialogue and understanding among the disparate groups. They are the crucial advocates for peace building, mediation, and the reconciliation efforts around the world. Their potential in resolving the conflicts both on local and the global scales can't be underestimated. It's really important to take on it. And when we come to the climate change and other factors or other areas or issues that we have to deal with, we recognize that young people aren't just the passive recipient of the impact of climate change and conflict. They are the driving solutions, which I must consider it as. They are often first responders in the emergencies and the innovators behind the sustainable technologies and the adaptation strategies. Even when I consider it as our world is confronted with an array of interconnected challenges, from conflict and security threats to the existential climate crisis. Amidst these challenges, young individuals, often we refer to as youth, are stepping up as a catalyst for transforming the change. So when we come to know that, okay, there are certain challenges that we are facing, or the youth are facing, many young leaders face the challenges accessing the decision-making spaces. Decision-making spaces, despite the UN resolution of 2250 advocating for the youth inclusion, we must collectively push for more youth involvement in the climate security policy. Even the climate activists often lack resources, making it challenging to amplify their voices. Supporting the mechanisms such as mentorship, funding, and etc. are essential to overcome this hurdle. So these kind of challenges, apart from that, there are resistance from those who might be resistant to changing the climate change agenda can be a roadblock, but it can encounter into this skepticism and pushback from the individual or institution to certain, not at the smaller level, but at the bigger level, recognizing the urgency of the climate security. So I encourage you all to take a call on, or to share your thoughts, and to encounter these kind of thoughts into our actions, that okay, just push more individuals, more youth into these kind of issues, into taking more consideration of their ideas and innovations. So this is the challenges that they are facing currently.
Thank you for also pointing that out, that, you know, that our generations are the innovators that are working forward and bringing these solutions to the broader body. So I thank you for highlighting that. I think it's a very important point. And Salim, would you like to answer the same question?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And to start with, I want to say I will speak from a very personal and maybe selfish perspective, especially regarding the demographic aspect of young people. Yeah, I want you to appreciate that in Africa, for example, where I come from, the young people are the biggest composition of our population. My country alone, Uganda has 78% of Ugandans are below the age of 35. So we have a demographic advantage. So if we have 78% of the population, wow, how exciting. If we can have this population, if we can have this big number engaged into the whole climate action, or at least half of it, I think we would be able to do so much. So I think, first of all, there are specific certain roles that young people are able to do, but also as we speak about what they are able to do, we need to know how they are able to do it. I want to provoke all of us to think about some of the avenues, even before we think about what the youth are supposed to do. What are some of those avenues that the young people consume a lot or are involved so much into? First of all, I would speak about social media. So how do we encourage young people to leverage social media to do climate action work? For example, I want to say, as a country and as a person, I consume a lot of social, I use social media a lot, but also as a country, we consume a lot of memes. I don't know if some people do that. Actually, we consume a lot of memes. So how do we, as climate action or climate justice activists, leverage on such an aspect? Okay, many Ugandan youth consume a lot of memes. How do we sit down? We have people called social media influencers. How do we tap into this social media influence space to make sure that social media influencers start to design memes that align with climate action? So we look at some of the spaces that young people are occupied into, or occupy young people, and start to use some of these spaces to pass the message that we want. And the young people as well, how do we use all these spaces? Social media, I see a lot of videos on TikTok. Many people use IG, many people use X, which is formerly Twitter. How do we use some of these spaces instead of, using TikTok to dance and, do a lot of not very useful work? How do we use some of these spaces to throw a voice, shed some light on some of these aspects? And then I think the other role young people can do, again, like I said, I'll speak from a personal perspective, 78% is too much. They can exert pressure on lawmakers, for example. Yeah, they can exert pressure. And maybe the other thing I would think is young people can boycott some of For example, we have had a number of boycotts in my country, young people choosing to boycott maybe a politician because they made something irregular, or because that politician said something about someone they love, or did something they wouldn't want to, So how do we look at some of these aspects? And as young people, take responsibility. This may not need resources. You don't need resources to boycott a politician who is not being climate sensitive. Yeah, you don't need resources to be able to exert pressure. Use social media, use some of these spaces. And maybe I want to say we engage actively in some of these platforms and forums that seek to shed light on the scourge. For example, you're invited to such a platform. Why not use it? When Gabriel wrote to me saying I had been accepted to speak to this event, I said, well, I am in, because I knew this was a space I could use to put a voice out there. So how do we leverage on all these spaces? Even when we go to conferences and summits, peace-related, climate-related, how much do we use them to put a voice out there? And maybe coming to some of the challenges, I would want to think that I think the most outstanding in my case would be poverty. Yeah, we have communities, well, in many parts of the world, but again, from experience and what I've seen, I've been to quite many African countries. I've seen communities which live in abject poverty. And when I left the summer school where I met Anika in July, I told a friend of mine I was planning to become a vegetarian. I told them, well, I've been inspired to switch and become vegetarian. He told me, and every time I keep recalling this, he says, well, the choice of being vegetarian is a choice of what in my country we call planned kids. So planned kids is a concept we use to refer to people who are maybe rich, they are filthy, they can make a choice. But how do you tell someone who is struggling to afford a meal to be vegetarian? I mean, in the first place, they don't even have a choice of which food they should eat. You won't tell them they throw away the meat because you want them to be vegetarian. So I think poverty affects the work that youth activists like myself and other activists out there are doing, but also it affects the general population. Generally, people don't have a choice. They have to go for some of these things because they are cheap. They have to go for some of these materials because they are accessible. And maybe sometimes the climate-related, climate-effective aspects are quite expensive. And then there are challenges like political restrictions. A lot of these in my country, you won't stage a demonstration and police doesn't, tear gas you. There are a lot of, so the political environment is not fertile for some of these activities. And yeah, some of these issues, there are also mentalities and notions surrounding the whole climate and peace nexus. People think, well, maybe that's the work of the UN. Yeah, there is a relatively big population of people out there, maybe in rural setups, who think, no, I think climate action is a work of the African, whatever. So some of these notions and mentalities somehow become challenges, not just to me, but also to many people who are trying to, shed light on this very sensitive issue. And I think we can do more. And I will just say, the biggest thing we can continue to do is raise awareness, invite everyone, tell them their voice can be appreciated, tell them the biggest thing they can do is influence their social systems, and we are able to, I think, do something about this.
Thank you so much. I think that was a really powerful speech. I don't know if everybody in the chat agrees with me. And you pointed out a lot of really practical things. So actually my next question was going to be about best practices, but I think you really already hit on a lot of those. You already you mentioned the digital revolution and how we can use that, about understanding different norms or how people are affected by the situations and that they're in, and supporting them where they are to help us all collectively reach where we can go together. And I think that is such an important point to raise, and the challenges facing activism in general. It's not just funding, although that's important. Please do fund the youth, but it does go beyond that, and to say that it's a much more complex issue than maybe it initially seems. So thank you so much. And I actually just 2 minutes each, maybe Sakshi and Robin, would you respond to that and maybe also say, like, if you could say what are some key things that could be done, some best practices that you would want to see implemented if you could let us know, and then we'll take a question or two from the audience before we go. Thanks. Sakshi, you want to go first?
Yeah, why not? So yes, okay, so what can be the solutions according to me? So there are certain challenges or that we have already taken up. There are certain challenges that Salim has rightly pointed out, and not the challenges, but he also pointed out the how because of the social media we can take upon these kind of issues into action. But what I have currently felt that there are the organizations that are currently dealing with all these scenarios. For example, Plan for the Planet or some other projects that we are currently dealing with, or youth or young delegates recently attend international climate negotiations and other areas where even YOUNGO delegation representing the young people at the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change meetings. So there are certain examples where we are seeing that these youth are currently encouraged and they have certain solutions that we are currently countering to. I really appreciate that today the best practices and inspiring case studies that has come up and showcase the how youth can be forefront of these driving change in these critical domains. The best practices to overcome these kind of barriers, I must ensure that the one of the most effective strategy is to ensure the young voices are not just heard but actively involved in the decision making processes, because one of the major challenges is just that they are not being heard of. So initiatives such as establishing youth advisory board or councils deciding to dedicated to the climate issues within the government bodies or international organizations have proven successful. So they ensure that the unique perspective of young people are taken into account into the policy development, policy implementation, and not about that, there are certain mentorship or just like we are doing the capacity building over here. So for the young leaders is another key practice of these barriers to be encountered with greater solution. This program help equip the young individuals with the knowledge and skills needed to engage effectively in the climate diplomacy. They bridge the generational knowledge gap and boost the confidence of young leaders. Even supporting the youth-led climate initiatives through dedicated fund mechanism. For example, what I have recently seen that the Youth Climate Fund initiated by the UNDP provides the financial support to young activists to bring their ideas to life. This empowers the young individuals to implement impactful projects and the campaigns. Even there are certain case studies that I have recently gone through with it on one go and come to know that there are case studies that is very successful. Like, for example, Zero Hour, a movement led by the youth. Then they have made waves by organizing mass mobilization and summits and work for these youth-driven climate action. Even there are certain programs that youth people are currently dealing with it by providing the training and support to the youth-led initiatives. These all are the things that best practices or the success stories that what is the innovative strategies that we can also inculcate apart from these are the major solution that we have to still to think about apart from the social media, apart from the implementation at the government, apart from the areas or steps that youth have already taken place. We also should think about how else we can inculcate these kind of scenarios into action. And this is the most important global efforts that we should make on to tackle this climate change and its security ramification, you can say so. So yeah, they actively contribute to the building climate resilience, showcasing the practical role young people can play.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I was just gonna say I think it's so nice to talk about the role of youth in peace building, and like you mentioned the advisory boards and having the representation, and this idea of representation in the diplomacy side as well, and not just even solution providing. So it's very important. And I just, for the time's sake, I want to make sure Robin has a chance to answer. Robin, would you like to talk about some of the best practices that you have seen and some successful avenues that you have seen for youth representation?
Yes, of course. I hope you can hear me better now. I think actually we can take YOUNGO almost as one of the best practices, or YOUNGO or UNY, so United Network of Youth Peace Builder. I think all those kind of umbrella organizations are doing a fantastic job essentially at flying out all the opportunities. They do manage to bring all those youth-led smaller organization, let's say, that do proper technical implementation on the ground and do have direct impact. They do manage to flag them, help them with sources of funding, help them to have a voice whenever it comes to representation. So I think it's usually a lot easier for organization like YOUNGO or for a decision like UNY to gather all those voices and to present them whether it is in UN events or something, because then we can ensure that there is a proper voice. Also, in other kind of similar avenue, but you have UNFCCC, for example, their youth caucus. So essentially having some established structure and just having that, making sure that in all those structure there's a proper active youth branch that will have projects that will essentially showcase. It's with youth getting more and more out there and having to kind of prove essentially in a way that there can be some successful project implementation. It's a bit like building a portfolio essentially for a person. So using leveraging those established structures and having that implementation from those established structure, I think it's usually a very good practice because it just sheds some light on what is already being there, and it uses essentially the force of what is in place in those big organizations. That being said, I am mindful of time. I think we're reaching the end, so I think I can leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Robin, and thank you to our audience for interacting today and to our speakers for your insights. I think you're actually brilliant, and I hope we can continue this conversation. And thank you again to the Geneva Peace Building Platform community practice, and thank you for having us. And if anyone would like to continue this conversation or has any follow-up questions, I know that this session was recorded and will be shared. If you'd like to follow up, please ask to be put in touch, and we're happy to continue this discussion. And again, thank you for your thoughts. So with that, I will wrap up the session. If anyone has any final comments or anything in the chat, please let us know. But thank you so much, everyone.